Francisco d'Ancona.
Watching, we know you.
Assalamu alaikum, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, assalatu wassalamu ala Rasul Kareem, amma ba'd. Welcome brothers and sisters to another episode of Face to Face with me, Azad Ali. And alhamdulillah, in the studio with me is, joining me is Imam Shakeel Begg from Lewisham Islamic Centre. Jazakallah khair for joining us, Imam Shakeel Begg. The discussion we really want to have is about our society. And in particular, the different Muslim organizations and institutions that are there serving the society, and really, is there a gap, and where can we show improvement? And really, I think what I want to cover is things like, there are lots of different social challenges, there are economical challenges, like Brexit is a big thing that's going on. How is it affecting us? But there's also maybe political stuff, educational and everything else. So from your experience, you've been doing, mashallah, a lot of work in the community, in your masajid. What sense do you get? Do you think that, the organizations, or we're doing enough to look at the different challenges? Let's take social challenges for us start.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Firstly, thank you to Azad Ali, host, and also Eman Channel for hosting me and giving me this opportunity. Yes, again, I think the challenges are quite large. Are we Muslim organizations, we as Muslims, able to deal with these challenges, or are we dealing with those challenges? I think, again, it goes back to a mindset that we might have, which is, if I can use a term, we tend to isolate ourselves. Challenges, I'm not speaking about challenges just for the Muslim community, the wider challenges, because as you mentioned, Brexit and education and finance and employment are wider issues and social challenges. As Muslims, in our organizations, who do we really serve? Who do we really cater for? It's just ourselves. How many Muslim organizations, or masajid or mosques, are really dealing with challenges and issues which affect everybody? I feel that as an approach is wrong. Yeah, it's not a prophetic approach of Prophet Muhammad or other prophets. I think that in itself is an issue in itself.
Okay, so if we were to have a more holistic approach on this, let's take an example of education, or no, let's actually just start with unemployment as being one. So one of the things is unemployment is not as bad as it's always been, but it is bad still. One of the challenges that we see in Muslim social media, or just in the wider kind of news and everything else, is that a lot of Muslims are finding it difficult to get a job because they're being discriminated against. If they keep a beard, if they wear a hijab, or if they wear a niqab and everything else. So they're facing these challenges. What do you think is being done? Is there enough being done by different organizations to take this hurdle away from them?
Alhamdulillah, I think in the last few years, 5-6 years, probably a decade or so, Muslim organizations have come about which are actually dealing with this issue. But on a wider scale, so these issues will be Muslims will be affected from non-Muslims, with the rise of that term Islamophobia and so on. What are we doing to avert the fears of those who are Islamophobic? Where's the engagement with them?
Right.
What has the Muslim community, even in their areas, done to outreach the non-Muslims? Okay. Let's say it's a mosque in an area. Has that mosque outreached non-Muslim neighbors to say, this is Islam, we are Muslims, we're like you, we have issues and concerns like you have, education, employment. Thinking of it in this way.
So you feel that bridging isn't happening. There isn't enough outreach in that sense to allay the fears that are being stoked perhaps by a certain quarter.
Definitely not.
Right.
Definitely not. And if it is being done, it's being done on a kind of like a level which is not grassroots. We're not affecting the grassroots of non-Muslims to avert their fears of Islam and Muslims. And that's the wider population.
So a lot of it is based on ignorance. A lot of the kind of misunderstandings is based on ignorance because you don't know the other person. So getting to know each other is very important. I accept that. But how do you bridge that gap? I mean, what kind of things, like, you know, do you see enough organizations doing that kind of work, or do you think it's missing totally?
Very few, yeah, if you know, that are doing it, but also I think, again, putting the emphasis on the individual self. These organizations need to give that kind of, like, what's the term? Not willpower, but the confidence.
Empowering.
Empowerment.
Yeah.
Empowerment is the word, actually.
Yeah.
Empowerment to individual Muslims to be able to avert the fear of Islamic Muslims from the non-Muslims they engage with.
Right.
Because you know, you can have 15, 20 organizations, but how much will it do?
Yeah.
But the 3 million, 4 million Muslim population of UK that engages, works, studies with non-Muslims is their duty.
Yeah.
Is their duty.
No, I actually find that a very interesting concept, and I think one that perhaps isn't explored more, because what I do see is there's a lot of interfaith work that's going on. There's a lot of conferences going on. There's a lot of, you know, highbrow things, if you like, that are more of a PR. You know, I'm not saying they are, but it feels to me like more of a PR, a public relations exercise, rather than actually empowering individuals to see that as a responsibility. If that is the case, is there an organization that thinks like that? Because, you know, you mentioned there are some that are trying to bridge the gap, but to me it feels like a very just, you know, it's a nicety. I don't think it's actually really reaching out. So do you know of any organizations that is actually doing that?
Okay, let me ask you a question, maybe, Azad Ali.
Please ask me a question.
In terms of, you know, Muslim organizations and Muslim leadership in the UK, how many of those organizations, and when I say organization, I mean members of those organizations, especially leadership, still say back home?
Yeah. Very good point.
You understand? Once we are saying back home, this it's not my home. Why should I really be catering for and working hard for a place which is not really my home? This is where the issue lies.
Right.
Once we start changing that perception, wait a minute, this is my home, my kids' home, my grandchildren's home. I need to make this society better and engage with a wider, my community. Let's not say another community, my community of non-Muslims. Then I think progression can take place and change can take place.
So in that, I agree with you. The identity side of it is, unless you believe this is your home, you're not really going to make that much of an effort. In the context of actually, okay, so I am now confident that this is or I'm 100%, I don't have any other homes. Like, you know, our children won't probably, you know of a back home. You know, maybe we would say it, but there's no way they're going to say it. So these young people, young men and women, they have no issues of you know, their belonging. They belong here, but they are still facing the challenge of you know, being discriminated against, but B, the lack of anyone empowering them to actually do that outreach. So what we see is a lot of people then turn to Islam in a particular way, which is, I want to learn some knowledge, I want to go to this conference, I want to do this. But that day-to-day things isn't happening. So are you aware of any projects? Do you think this is something that we should be looking into?
I think definitely we should be looking into, because any practice of Islam which is not relevant in society is not really. Remember, Islam itself is an action. It's like you're submitting. A Muslim is someone who is actively submitting to Allah Almighty. So Islam needs to be a relevant practice of ours in any society. You know, so if I'm studying Islam, but it's in the masjid and I'm praying and I'm doing tahajjud, it's good. But where is my practice of Islam in society for myself and my family and others, Muslims and non-Muslims alike? That's not being done. At the same time, yes, challenges are great. And as you mentioned earlier on, Muslims are facing discrimination in employment, education, housing, and so on. How do you empower these Muslims, especially youngsters, to because another approach is don't say nothing. Accept the situation that you're in and accept yourself to be second-class citizens. Does that do any good?
No. Obviously,
you know. So these are issues.
It's not helpful at all. Yeah. But the rationale might be that, you know, well, you're just going to make it worse.
Yeah.
And do you think a lot of that thinking is from people who don't really see this as their home? Is that the case, do you think?
In my perception, yes. We're here for a short stay. We're going back home. Don't rock the boat. Don't challenge. You know, take what you get, and that's it. Eventually, we're going to go back. But again, for that second, third, fourth generation of Muslims, it is their home. Why should they be second-class citizens just because of their faith? They chose to be Muslims. Some people are Christians. Some people are Jews. Some people are Hindu or Sikh. Why should they be treated any differently? And that empowerment needs to be given to them to challenge. So
that you mentioned empowerment quite a few times. Can you give me an example of how we can do this empowerment? What would you like to see? Like for example, you know, if some organizations did this would be helpful.
Okay, it's on the spot. I would say giving the leadership issue. Listen to youngsters more and giving them leadership in our organizations.
Okay.
I even go far as and say, really, imams need to be British born.
Okay.
Yeah, imams in mosques need to be British born, and leadership in prominent organizations should be from those who have been born in the United Kingdom. That will be a step in change, inshallah.
Okay. No, Jazakallah khair. I think that's, and I'm sorry I did put you on the spot, but I had a feeling you would come out with a gem of an answer, and you did. But we're going to take a quick break, and inshallah I want to explore this after the break. So viewers, do join us after this short break, inshallah. See you soon. Assalamu alaikum. So just before the break, Imam Shakeel, you mentioned one of the key things that would help is leadership. You know, that if the leadership is coming from people who are born and bred here, you know, that empowerment will be more easily facilitated. And I think, you know, it's a very important concept and idea. In terms of, you know, we can kind of talk about the very different issues. So you've got social issues, whether they're drugs, knife crimes, and other social ills, or economic issues that we just briefly discussed, or even the political issues. There is you know, a lot of tensions politically in various parts of the world, or you know, humanitarian issues. So you know, what's going on with the Uyghur Muslims in China at the moment, or the Yemen war, or what happened in Syria. There are so many different things, and you know, I think you mentioned, you know, at the start of the program, that there are a number of things that can happen. It can almost feel overwhelming. What do you do? Where do you start? And everything else. In going through all of this thing, I think, you know, a lot of people are always very busy putting out the fires, but no one's actually focusing, okay, what is causing the fires? Do you see in any institutions that are looking at this in a long-term approach, where they're actually trying to build, you know, rather than us rushing out and putting out every fire that comes, let's find out how to stop the fires starting in the first place. Do you see that happening?
I think there is a discussion taking place between leadership from various Muslim organizations in UK, more specifically in London. So a discussion is taking place, and also, yes, you could say privy to discussions between imams specifically. Large group of imams having discussions on a regular basis concerning the way forward, strategy, what needs to be done, what needs to change, what are the mistakes we have made, is there lack of understanding of Islam, practicing Islam in our context. So, which I see, alhamdulillah, was not happening, let's say, 10 years ago. So it is progression in that sense. Okay, so
there is some of this thinking going. Now, in that thinking, how do you determine what the priorities would be, for example? So, I mean, we talked a lot about social issues and bridging the gap and Islamophobia and everything else, but one of the things is Islam itself. I mean, the primary purpose that we have as Muslims after the Shahada and doing our, you know, requirements, faraid, is to actually give the dawah of the deen. Do you think that dawah is there still in our community, or is it just done by one or two people, organizations?
I would say da'wah, but maybe not from the traditional way or sense of da'wah. Yeah, I mean, I'll give you an example. This is Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, leaving, a woman is leaving Mecca because of Prophet Muhammad. And she's saying, look, this man, you know, brought misery to Mecca. He's divided our society, and she's leaving with her luggage and her load. And a man comes and says, let me help you. So this man helps her, and while he's helping her to her other destination, all she's doing is cursing Prophet Muhammad. At the end of the journey, she says, look, what's your name? You're a fine man. He says his name. He says, look, say it again. He says, my name is Muhammad. I said, that is da'wah. Yeah. And she says, I bear witness you are the messenger of Allah. You know, da'wah through positive engagement in society. Your neighbor is hungry. Your neighbor's son's gone to prison. Your neighbor's an old lady. Do you go and knock on her door and say, look, auntie, mother, what can I do for you? You're finding it difficult to the shops for shopping. I can do the shopping for you. That is da'wah, which is needed. And it is a priority, as you mentioned. It is a priority, yeah.
So do you see that happening? I don't know, in your institution, is this a part of your kind of work that you guys do, that, you know, look at how can we help the society rather than just look at ourselves?
Yeah, definitely. We've kind of like, especially local, the elderly, we put a message out. Look, if anybody needs any support, any help with shopping, the mosque volunteers are ready to help.
Okay, so you have a group of volunteers who would help.
And that's, you know, just as a side point, you know, sometimes in a masjid, the imam might get the credit, or the trustees. And in the locality where I'm from, it's actually the community. You know, sometimes somebody will come and say, oh, Jazakallah Imam for this. I say, look, it's not me. It's not even me. It's actually the volunteers that facilitate this. And that's quite important, you know, for communities to have.
I mean, we are facing a lot of difficulties. I mean, I mentioned Brexit earlier. It is something that is on a lot of people's minds. But on top of that, you know, we are at a time where actually there are lots of food banks being operated. There are a lot of people still homeless and everything else. So in that sense, there is a lot of need. Do you think that investment, so Muslims are, alhamdulillah, by the grace of Allah, the most giving in terms of charity. And do you think, you know, like I think last year it was over 100 million that the Muslims raised just in Ramadan. Do you think that money that's been raised primarily for places abroad and everything else, is that the right thing to do, or should there be a
question, yeah?
Huh?
Controversial question.
Well, it is and it isn't. But is it? I'm not saying we shouldn't do it at all. There should be, but should there be a percentage that is invested here where we are, and the needs that we have as a community?
Yeah. So I mean, look, I would not deny the connection with the global ummah. Yeah, or the term even ummah.
Yeah.
That connection
of course,
is
it's part of our religion. That's,
so you know what the Rohingya Muslims are going through, what the Uyghur Muslims in China are going through, Muslims across the globe. We have a sense of obligation, love, loyalty, and that need for support for them. At the same time, those who are near us and those who are close to us, Muslims and non-Muslims alike, they also have a right over us. So Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as an example in Mecca, Hilf al-Fudul. Hilf al-Fudul, where he helped, you know, the widows, the orphans. Those were his people who were close to him. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And even the concept of zakat, there is a concept of, look, taking it from within the community and distributing it within the community. And that should not be kind of like sidelined and forgotten. And also sometimes we get into this debate, look, just there, just here. Look, you know, the empathy should be there, that we can, inshallah, do here and there and everywhere and serve, you know, those who are needed.
I mean, the sense I'm getting from a lot of things what you're saying is, you know, if we are certain of our identity, certain of our belonging, if we invest in our youngsters or our people, empower them, and actually facilitate the outreach and everything else, this will close the gap and everything else. But isn't that what a lot of people say? I mean, yes, there's 3 million Muslims, but let's just say 1 million are too young. let's just say another million is busy with other things. Let's just say there's only 1 million. If 1 million Muslims actually just did what you were just suggesting, well, the change would be huge, wouldn't it?
Yeah, of course.
So then what causes us not to be on the same page? Is it that you're seeing that, you know, in society, you're looking at it from your point of view, your vantage point, just from the area that you're in, and other people are seeing other priorities, and that there are so many competing priorities that, you know, we are actually spread thin?
Yeah, I think all of that is part of the problem. There's global politics which kind of like affect, you know, the way we function here. There's the issue of misunderstanding Islam. There's the issue of lack of unity. There's, you know, all of these issues affect our functioning here. I mean, as a kind of like a main issue, where the Muslim community can be united here. You know, so you're no longer, you know, the Pakistani community, the Mongolian community, the Egyptian, the Moroccan. So sometimes we look at our situation from that lens.
Right.
I'm actually Pakistani Muslim community in London, UK. I'm actually from this Bengali, you know, Muslim community in UK. So you're already looking at it from a specific kind of like way and lens. If you're to say, look, well, I'm actually Muslim community, part of the Muslim community in Britain, or British Muslim community, it changes the way you will look at things straight away.
Right.
So that also is kind of like an issue, I would say, that affects our functioning.
Okay, and I mean we're coming close to the end. And what would you say? I mean, it's a big topic, Muslim organisations and projects as society. I mean, what would you say are? I mean, you mentioned leadership and everything else before. What would you say that would help at least get us on the right track to actually look at ourselves here in the UK in a positive way, like the positive action you were talking about? What kind of things would help?
Okay, very, very briefly, I would say changing our perception of Islam is crucial. I'll give you an example. Hijab. Saudi has a hijab for Muslim women. Yemen has its own style. Go to Egypt, it's slightly different. Go to Somalia, slightly different. Go to North Africa, Tunisia, Morocco, Algeria, slightly different. Go to West Africa, slightly different. Go to the subcontinent, go to the Far East, it's all hijab. Yeah. But what happened is they put that hijab with the guidelines coming from Quran and Sunnah in their context. Yeah. We haven't been able to do this here. Why? We're bringing our perception of Islam from our environment, from other places, rather than having our own context. So that's one, changing that perception of understanding Islam and how it's practiced and viewed here. The other key issue would be unity of Muslims. Unifying our organizations, unifying our imams, unifying ourselves, and understanding sometimes there are those who would like to see us divided, but they have their political agendas, and they're also from abroad and not here. The other key issue would be, I think, again, the issue of language. Issue of language, using English as our medium within our organizations, within ourselves, within our masajid, and of course the imam should be speaking English in their lectures and sermons and so on. And I think another final one, giving that leadership to youth, letting them take the mantle and the role of leadership in the UK.
Okay. Now, alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair. I think that's actually a very comprehensive approach, and I think if we can at least embark with the intention of achieving some of those things, I think we would go a long way. Again, jazakumullah khair for joining us, and it's actually a big subject. Inshallah, we will explore some of these ideas a little bit more in detail. But for now, thank you very much all for joining us, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair, Sheikh.
Thank you very much. Barakallah.
Watching, we know you